In 1949, Oldsmobile dropped a big engine into a small car and accidentally invented an entire genre. The Rocket 88 wasn't supposed to be a performance icon. It was a mid-range sedan with an overhead valve V8 meant for the luxury division. But it won races, dominated NASCAR, and taught Detroit a formula it would repeat for the next 20 years. This is the story of the Rocket 88, the car that proved power plus lightness equals revolution. February 1950, Daytona Beach. A two-tone Oldsmobile 88 hardtop idles at the starting line, engine note deeper than anything in its class should sound. The car looks ordinary. Chrome bumpers, fastback roofline, nothing aggressive, nothing sculpted for speed. Just a family sedan with white wall tires and a rocket-shaped hood ornament. But under that hood sits something new. A 303 cubic inch overhead valve V8 producing 135 horsepower. Modest by today's standards, but in 1949 it was a revelation, and that engine was sitting in a body designed for Oldsmobile's cheapest full-size platform, not its flagship 98. The flag drops, the 88 launches, and within seconds it's clear something fundamental has changed in American automotive culture. This wasn't a limited production special. It wasn't a hand-built racer with a five-figure price tag. It was a car you could buy at a dealership for $2,200, drive home, and take racing on Sunday without modifications. The Rocket 88 didn't just win that race, it won 8 out of 10 NASCAR Grand National events in 1950. It became the car every bootlegger wanted and every stock car driver feared. And it did it all by accident. Oldsmobile hadn't set out to build a muscle car, the term didn't even exist yet. They'd simply made a corporate decision to standardize their new V8 across multiple body platforms. The engineering logic was sound. One engine, lower production costs, easier service training, but when that powerful engine met the lighter, smaller 76 and 88 series bodies, the result was something nobody at General Motors had anticipated, a performance advantage so overwhelming it couldn't be ignored. This is the story of innovation born from pragmatism, of dominance achieved through parts bin engineering, of the machine that taught Detroit its most profitable lesson. Put your biggest engine in your smallest car and the customers will line up. The Rocket 88 wasn't just a fast car, it was a blueprint. And every GTO, every Chevelle SS, every Roadrunner and Super B that followed was built on the formula it proved. Picture the American automotive landscape of 1948. The war's over, production lines are humming again, and every manufacturer is racing to replace outdated pre-war designs with something modern, something optimistic, something that screams peacetime prosperity. But under those new bodies, most cars were still running pre-war technology. Flathead engines, 3-speed manuals, solid axles, and drum brakes. The engineering was conservative because the market was conservative. People wanted reliability, not innovation. Performance, when it existed at all, came from one place: big, heavy luxury cars with large displacement engines. If you wanted power, you bought a Cadillac or a Packard or a Lincoln. You paid for every horsepower with weight, cost, and complexity. The youth market didn't exist yet. Hot rodding was still a fringe culture. Confined to dry lakes and homemade specials built from Ford Model A parts. Nobody at the Big Three was thinking about young buyers or performance demographics. They were building cars for returning servicemen starting families and buying homes in the suburbs. General Motors was the industry leader, and its divisions operated under strict hierarchies. Chevrolet was the volume brand. Pontiac was a step up. Oldsmobile sat in the middle. Buick appealed to professionals. Cadillac crowned the range. Each division had its role, its price point, its identity. That structure worked when products stayed in their lanes, but Oldsmobile was about to blur those lines completely. In 1946, Oldsmobile's chief engineer Gilbert Burrell and research head Harold Metzel began development on a new V8 engine. The goal wasn't performance, it was efficiency and modernity. They wanted an overhead valve design that could produce more power per cubic inch than the division's aging flathead straight 8 while weighing less and running smoother. By 1948, they'd succeeded. The Rocket V8 displaced 303 cubic inches and produced 135 horsepower, 30 more than the old flathead, from less displacement in a package that weighed 70 pounds less. It was a technical achievement, clean and practical. Corporate logic said this engine belonged in Oldsmobile's top model, the 98. That's where the profit margins lived. That's where customers expected power and refinement. Installing it in the cheaper 76 and 88 series was simply an efficiency move, a way to simplify production and spread development costs. Nobody thought about what would happen when you gave a mid-size car more power than its luxury sibling weighed less to carry. Nobody ran the performance calculations. Nobody considered the implications. The Rocket 88 debuted in January 1949 at the Detroit Auto Show. Press coverage focused on the styling, the modern fastback profile, the two-tone paint options. A few technical magazines noted the new overhead valve V8, but there was no fanfare about performance, no marketing push around speed or power, and yet, within months, something strange started happening. Racers noticed, mechanics noticed, people who paid attention to power-to-weight ratios noticed. The Rocket 88 was significantly quicker than anything in its price range, and it handled NASCAR's stock car rules perfectly. Minimal modifications, maximum results. By late 1949, the whispers had turned into a wave. This unassuming Oldsmobile wasn't just fast, it was dominant. And the men who built it were about to watch their practical engineering exercise become a cultural phenomenon. Pull back the hood of a 1949 Rocket 88, and you're looking at the reason overhead valves changed everything. The Rocket V8 breathed differently than any mass-production engine America had seen. Where flathead designs forced air and fuel through tortured paths around side-mounted valves, the Rocket's overhead valve layout put intake and exhaust ports directly above the combustion chamber. Air flowed straight in. Exhaust gases flowed straight out. No compromises, no detours. Think of it as the difference between breathing through a straw and breathing normally. The restriction disappears, power follows. The engine displaced 303 cubic inches with a bore of 3.75 inches and a stroke of 3.44 inches, slightly over square, which meant it could rev higher than long-stroke designs without tearing itself apart. Compression ratio was 7.25 to 1. Mild by modern standards, but aggressive for an era when most engines ran around 6.5 to 1 and premium fuel meant 80 octane. But the real innovation was in the valve train. Overhead valves weren't new. Duesenberg had used them in the 1920s and Jaguar was using them in England. But nobody had mass-produced them in America at this price point. The complexity and cost had always been prohibitive. Oldsmobile solved that with hydraulic valve lifters. Mechanical lifters required constant adjustment as they wore. Hydraulic lifters self-adjusted, using oil pressure to maintain zero lash automatically. It was brilliant simplicity. Maintenance dropped, noise dropped, reliability increased. The result was 135 horsepower at 3,600 RPM and 263 pound-feet of torque at 1,800 RPM. Those numbers don't sound impressive today. But in 1949, they were outstanding for a sub-$2,500 car. The Rocket 88 had more power than a Cadillac Series 62, and it weighed 300 pounds less. Weight was the secret multiplier. The 88 Series body rode on a 119.5-inch wheelbase, 5 inches shorter than the 98. It used less sheet metal, simpler trim, lighter interior components. Oldsmobile listed the curb weight at 3,545 pounds for the fastback sedan. That gave it a power-to-weight ratio of roughly 26 pounds per horsepower. Compare that to Cadillac's Series 62, which carried about 31 pounds per horsepower, or Buick's Roadmaster at 29. The Rocket 88 was lighter and more powerful than cars costing considerably more, and it looked completely ordinary doing it. Contemporary road tests captured the shock. Motor Trend called it a real tiger on the road. Tom McCahill at Mechanics Illustrated wrote that it would blow the doors off anything up to twice its price. The car hit 60 miles per hour in under 12 seconds, about 2 seconds quicker than most family sedans. But speed was only part of the equation. The Rocket 88 handled NASCAR's homologation requirements perfectly. Grand National rules in 1950 mandated showroom stock bodies with only safety modifications allowed. No engine swaps, no chassis changes. You raced what the factory built. That meant the car that dominated NASCAR wasn't a special. It was the same car sitting on dealer lots. And people noticed. Bootleggers in the South bought them. Police departments ordered them. Teenagers saved up for them. And race teams won with them repeatedly throughout 1950 and into 1951. The Rocket 88 proved something Detroit hadn't fully understood before. Performance didn't require exotic engineering or hand assembly. It required smart packaging and aggressive decisions about where to allocate power and weight. But every revolution has its breaking point, and this one was about to face its own. Success brought scrutiny, and scrutiny brought change. By mid-1951, the Rocket 88's dominance in NASCAR had become a problem. Not for Oldsmobile, they were winning races and selling cars. The problem was for everyone else. Hudson, Plymouth, Ford, and Mercury couldn't keep up. The racing was becoming predictable, and predictable racing doesn't sell tickets or generate press. NASCAR's leadership watched the 1950 and 1951 seasons unfold with growing concern. Oldsmobile drivers took the checkered flag in more than half the races. Red Byron, Bob Flock, Tim Flock. They were talented drivers, but their advantage came from the car. Everyone knew it. The competition knew it. The fans knew it. Something had to change, or the sport's credibility would suffer. In late 1951, NASCAR began revising its technical regulations. The organization introduced displacement limits and weight penalties designed to level the field. Cars with overhead valve engines faced stricter scrutiny. Minimum weight requirements increased for certain configurations. The rules were crafted carefully, neutrally on paper, but everyone understood the target. The Rocket 88's natural advantage was being legislated away, not banned outright. That would have been too obvious, but neutered through incremental restrictions that made the formula less effective. Oldsmobile didn't fight it publicly. They'd never positioned the 88 as a race car, and NASCAR represented a tiny fraction of their sales volume. The division sold over 400,000 cars in 1950. Racing was marketing, not the mission. When the rules changed, Oldsmobile quietly shifted resources elsewhere. But internally, there was frustration. Engineers had built something special by accident, watched it succeed beyond expectations, and then saw that success regulated away before it could fully mature. The Rocket 88 had proven a concept, but the sport it dominated decided the concept was too dominant. Other manufacturers, meanwhile, learned the lesson. Hudson responded with the Hornet, matching the Rocket's formula with a powerful six-cylinder in a low-light body. Chrysler began developing its own overhead valve V8, the firepower Hemi. The industry was catching up, and Oldsmobile's head start was evaporating. There was also tension inside General Motors. The Rocket 88's performance had inadvertently stepped on Cadillac's toes. Here was a mid-range Oldsmobile outrunning the corporation's flagship luxury brand. That wasn't how the hierarchy was supposed to work. Pontiac and Buick executives started asking why Oldsmobile got the hot engine first. Internal politics complicated what should have been a straightforward engineering win. By 1952, the Rocket 88 was no longer the fastest thing in its class. It was still a good car, still respected, but the competition had closed the gap. Hudson's Hornet took over NASCAR. Chrysler's Hemi-powered cars started winning on the street. The window of dominance had closed. And perhaps most significantly, Oldsmobile itself moved on. The division updated the Rocket V8, increasing displacement and power, but it spread that power across heavier, more luxurious models. The 88 gained weight and comfort features. It became a premium car, not a performance outlier. The formula that made the original Rocket 88 special, big engine, small body, minimal equipment, was abandoned as quickly as it had been discovered. Profit margins lived in options and upgrades, not stripped-down sleepers. The engineers who'd created the Rocket V8 watched their work evolve into something different, not worse necessarily, just softer, more refined, less surprising. How did it all go wrong? It didn't, exactly. The Rocket 88 succeeded wildly by every commercial measurement, but the thing that made it legendary, that raw, accidental performance advantage core, was too disruptive to sustain. Racing politics, corporate hierarchy, and market expectations all pushed it toward normalcy. The revolution was over almost as soon as it began, but the blueprint remained. When the dust settled in 1953, the automotive press moved on. The Rocket 88 transitioned from phenomenon to footnote. Reviews praised its comfort and refinement. Nobody talked about racing anymore. Oldsmobile's sales told a different story. The division sold 354,000 cars in 1951, then climbed to 407,000 in 1952. The Rocket 88 remained popular, but increasingly as a well-appointed family sedan with a powerful engine, not as a performance statement. The audience had shifted from speed enthusiasts to comfort buyers who appreciated smooth power delivery and highway passing ability. Contemporary road tests reflected the change. Motor Trend's 1953 review focused on interior space and ride quality. Speed mentioned almost as an afterthought. The 0 to 60 times had barely changed, but the context around them had shifted completely. What was once thrilling had become expected. NASCAR's landscape evolved rapidly. Hudson's Hornet, with its legendary step-down chassis and potent inline-six, dominated the 1952, 1953, and 1954 seasons. The fabulous Hudson Hornet won more races than any other car during that stretch, and its success was built on the same formula the Rocket 88 pioneered: powerful engine, light body, minimal frills. But Hudson did it intentionally. Marshall Teague and Herb Thomas drove factory-backed Hornets with full engineering support. Hudson embraced its racing success, marketed it aggressively, and made performance a core brand identity. Oldsmobile had stumbled into performance and then walked away from it. Former Rocket 88 drivers moved to other makes. Red Byron retired. Bob Flock switched to Hudson. The grassroots racers who'd bought 88s for local tracks started looking at newer, faster options. By 1954, you could find used Rocket 88s at small tracks across the South, still competitive in local series, but no longer the feared machines they'd been 4 years earlier. The hot rod community had a different relationship with the car. Speed shops in Southern California began pulling Rocket V8 engines from wrecked Oldsmobiles and dropping them into stripped-down pre-war Ford and Mercury coupes. The engine's overhead valve design and reliability made it a popular swap for builders who wanted something more modern than a flathead but less expensive than a Cadillac unit. Magazines like Hot Rod and Motor Trend occasionally featured rocket-swapped customs, but the engine never achieved the cult status of Chrysler's Hemi or later Chevrolet's small block. It was respected, proven, but not mythologized. Internally, Oldsmobile focused on luxury and innovation in different directions. The division introduced power steering in 1952, one of the first American manufacturers to do so. They experimented with automatic transmission refinements. The engineering priorities shifted toward comfort technology rather than raw performance. The Rocket V8 continued to evolve. Displacement increased to 324 cubic inches in 1954, then 371 in 1957. Power climbed accordingly, but those engines went into increasingly heavy, chrome-laden cars built for boulevard cruising, not back-road brawling. The 88 nameplate survived, but its character transformed. Dealers who'd watched customers race Rocket 88s in 1950 now watched them buy them for quiet highway trips and suburban commutes. The shift wasn't sudden or dramatic, it was gradual, like watching a fire burn down to embers, still warm, still functional, but no longer blazing. Automotive historians writing in the late 1950s barely mentioned the Rocket 88's racing heritage. The Hudson Hornet got the glory. The 55 Chevrolet with its small block V8 got the attention. Oldsmobile's contribution was acknowledged politely and then set aside. But history has a habit of rediscovering what it once discarded. And in the years that followed, a new generation of engineers would remember what the Rocket 88 proved and apply those lessons with intention rather than accident. Fast forward to 1964. Pontiac drops a 389 cubic inch V8 into an intermediate-sized Tempest and calls it GTO. The muscle car era begins, and everyone forgets that Oldsmobile did it first. The GTO wasn't revolutionary, it was a Rocket 88, 15 years later, with better marketing. Big engine, small body, affordable price. The formula worked in 1949. It worked even better in 1964 when a generation of young buyers with disposable income wanted exactly that combination. John DeLorean and Pete Estes, the Pontiac executives who conceived the GTO, understood what Oldsmobile's engineers had stumbled upon. They'd grown up watching NASCAR in the 1950s. They knew which cars won and why. They took that institutional knowledge and weaponized it. Every muscle car that followed, Chevelle SS, Plymouth Roadrunner, Dodge Super Bee, Buick GS, AMC Rebel Machine, used the Rocket 88 blueprint. They refined it, marketed it better, built entire performance divisions around it. But the core formula never changed. Chrysler's engineers explicitly cited the Rocket 88 when developing their 1960s performance strategy. Internal memos from the era reference Oldsmobile's NASCAR success as proof that budget-conscious performance cars could win races and move metal. The 1968 Roadrunner, designed to undercut the GTO on price while matching it on performance, was the Rocket 88 concept perfected through a decade of iteration. Ford's Boss 302 Mustang, Mercury's Cyclone, even AMC's underdog efforts with the Javelin, all descendants of the philosophy, the Rocket 88, proved viable. Put your biggest engine in your lightest platform, price it competitively. Let the performance speak for itself, but by the time these cars dominated the market, the original Rocket 88s had largely disappeared. They weren't collectible in the 1960s, they were just old Oldsmobiles, outdated and worn out. Most went to junkyards, some became demolition derby fodder. A few survived in the hands of enthusiasts who remembered what they'd meant. The collector market eventually noticed. By the 1980s, restored Rocket 88s began appearing at shows, particularly the fastback models and convertibles. But they never achieved the stratospheric values of Hemi Cudas or LS6 Chevelle. They remained affordable, accessible, and underappreciated. That changed gradually as automotive historians dug deeper into NASCAR's early years. Books published in the 1990s and 2000s began properly crediting the Rocket 88 as the first mass-produced muscle car. The narrative shifted. What had been forgotten became foundational. Modern restorers face unique challenges with these cars. Parts availability is limited. The Rocket V8, while reliable, lacks the massive aftermarket support of Chevrolet's small block or Chrysler's LA engines. Carburetors, ignition parts, and gaskets require hunting through specialty suppliers or fabrication. But that scarcity has created a dedicated community. Clubs formed around Oldsmobile's early overhead valve cars preserve technical knowledge and share restoration tips. Online forums catalog original specifications. Small businesses specialize in reproducing trim pieces and mechanical components that haven't been available for decades. Contemporary automotive journalists occasionally drive restored Rocket 88s and publish retrospectives. The common reaction is surprise. These cars feel more modern than their 1949 date suggests. The overhead valve engine sounds crisp and pulls smoothly. The chassis isn't sophisticated by current standards, but it's competent and communicative. And there's something emotional about driving the template. You can feel the directness, the simplicity of the concept. This is what performance meant before computers, before emissions regulations, before safety requirements layered complexity onto everything. Just an engine, a chassis, and a willingness to prioritize speed over sophistication. The sound of that Rocket V8 at full throttle wasn't just horsepower. It was defiance cast in iron. A middle management decision turned cultural flashpoint, a parts bin special that rewrote the rulebook. What began as a cost-saving measure became a legend, long after the engineers who built it retired and the factories that produced it moved on to other projects. The Rocket 88 didn't just inspire the muscle car era. It proved the formula could work before anyone knew there was a formula to prove. February 1950, Daytona Beach. That two-tone Oldsmobile, crossing the finish line ahead of cars that should have been faster. That image crystallizes everything the Rocket 88 represented. It wasn't the most beautiful car of its era. It wasn't the most expensive or the most exotic. It was just better balanced, better executed, and brutally effective at the one thing that mattered on Sunday afternoon: winning. The Rocket 88 taught Detroit that performance could be democratized, that speed didn't require hand-built engines or limited production, that the formula was simple: power, lightness, price. Do those three things right and customers will line up. Every GTO, every Super B, every 442, and SS 396 that followed owes its existence to an Oldsmobile that accidentally proved the concept 15 years early. The muscle car era wasn't invented in 1964. It was discovered in 1949 and then forgotten until someone remembered to look back. Today, those early Rocket 88s represent something more than automotive history. They're proof that the best innovations often come from practical decisions, not grand visions. That sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is put the pieces together in a way nobody expected and see what happens. The cars still exist. Not many, but enough. At shows, in garages, occasionally on back roads where someone with a love for history and overhead valves takes their restoration out to remember what 75-year-old speed feels like. If you've ever driven or seen one of these machines, share your story in the comments. How did it sound? How did it feel? What did it teach you about the era that built it? The Rocket 88 wasn't trying to make history, it was trying to simplify production. But it ended up defining performance for generations of cars that followed, and its legacy lives on every time someone drops a big engine into a small car and watches what happens when power meets lightness. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.